issue 32. This time we look at an album that's newly released, but it moves in the realms of ghosties and ghoulies, and there's nothing worse than being caught by the ghoulies. I had a pair of trousers with a dodgy zip like that. But what am I talking about? I'm talking about the new album from the future Kings of England. It's called Who Is This Who Is Coming? Sounds like a dodgy 70s porn film, doesn't it? But no, I'm being silly. There was an English author called M.R. James who probably is famously known for his ghost stories. And one of these ghost stories is called, and I just want to get the title right because Wikipedia is good for this because I don't want to look a complete bellend. Oh, whistle and I'll come to you, my lad. And that's what this record is based upon. For those of you who are in England or have knowledge of English culture, you may be familiar with the play from 1968 called, again I'm going to whistle and I'll come to you. It gets a bit confusing. Starring Michael Hordern, he of Paddington Bear fame. And I lost my thread for a minute there. Yeah, it was directed by Jonathan Miller, and it was a very frightening ghost story. See, the ghoulies thought of ghoulies were kind of distracting me, and it was a very, very scary ghost story. They remade it recently with John Hurt, but it wasn't as scary. But anyway, the future Kings of England, these fellows, have decided to do what could be called a concept album based upon that same story. Now, I'll come clean, I didn't pay for this one. I won this in a competition on Twitter, so this is the first time I think I've reviewed something I haven't actually paid for. Do you still trust me? I'm not as bad as those shitheads who write for magazines. I'm not as bad as them. I've listened to this 3 times today, so I've actually listened to the album. But I digress. I've been familiar with the future Kings of England for a couple of years now. I've got a couple of their albums off of eMusic, and again, I'm not really sure if they're classed as progressive rock per se. They're more psychedelia, I think you'd probably call it, and it's very guitar based, and it's kind of Floydish. And this album is a bit of a departure, I'd say, from what they normally do, only slightly, but it's quite an interesting record, because what they've done is they've created a soundtrack to a film that hasn't been made, and I quite like that. I mean, it's a solid piece. It's very atmospheric in places. I'm not going to bother going through it track by track, because I think you've got to listen to this as a whole. This works better as a whole album rather than separate songs, because all the songs are interconnected and flow into each other. So it is more like listening to a proper concept album. It's largely instrumental. There are only 2 vocal singy songs on it, and unfortunately for me, just for me, mind, they are the weakest points, because it goes a little bit hey nonny nonny. Sounds a little bit raga, if you know what I mean. And for me, it kind of it broke up the tension, because it was the first time a human voice is kind of really heard singing, and it just you go, oh, where did that come from? And it also stylistically it kind of jars, because you've got this kind of atmospheric moody stuff going on, and then all of a sudden it kind of goes a bit folky and a bit but hey, they knew what they were doing. I didn't quite get it. In parts, it kind of reminded me of the work that Goblin did with Dario Argento. I'm sure you're familiar with those guys. If you're not, check them out. Another band to check out is Popol Vuh. I can never pronounce it right. They're like the German equivalent, who did a lot of soundtrack work, and it's kind of in that vein. It's not progressive in the fact that it's going to take you to new musical areas. It's not like that at all. It's much more safe. It's much more measured. It's much more. It's more about atmosphere. It's more about building up to something. And I thought it worked. It worked really well as a soundtrack album. Not so much as an album. I thought it was a bit, listening to their previous stuff, I didn't think it was, it's not any kind of progression or departure from what they've done before. There's a lot of tones and sounds on here that you've heard before. They're not moving in any particularly new direction. They're kind of, in the same furrow, if you will. But I really did like it as a soundtrack. That's how I approached it, as a soundtrack album. I know you're probably thinking, what's the difference, Darren? Well, a soundtrack album, you kind of paint pictures in your head of a movie. As an album, properly, you kind of put pictures there. That's how I went into it. I'm probably talking a load of bollocks. Am I talking a load of bollocks tonight? I think I might be. It's been a long day. But yeah, so that's how I kind of looked at it as, and I think that's how it should be appreciated, really. I mean, I think it'd be pretty cool if there was some visuals put to this. I think that's the problem. I think it probably does need some visuals. I don't think the music's strong enough itself to kind of carry the narrative, if you know what I mean. Again, I'm not being unfair. If you hear this, you'd understand, and I'm sure the band themselves would understand that one. But yeah, I mean, if you've never checked out the Future Kings of England, this is probably their best album. I'll give them that. This is their best album because it's cohesive, it flows, it really is. Everything really does come together on it, and you do have a sense of a story unfolding. Even though the two vocal songs are a little bit of a hiccup. But yeah, if you like the Floyd, in that kind of guitar-based, spacey rock kind of thing, you're gonna like that. The last track, Spectacle of a Scarecrow, they kind of almost borrowed the riff from Echoes, when the song rejoins with the delay guitar. It was a nice touch. But yeah, I mean, I did enjoy it. It wasn't a bad record. And yeah, I thought it was good. I'm not sure what the band were trying to achieve, but I enjoyed it. If you've not checked them out, I'm sure if you can get it off of eMusic, I'm sure it'll be coming out on eMusic. They've got a website, www.thefuturekingsofengland.com. Go there and listen to it. And that's it, really. So now I'm going to have to give it a rating. Well, I'm going to give this one, I'm going to give it 2 ratings. As a soundtrack, I'm going to give it 4 bone whistles out of 5. That's 4 bone whistles out of 5. But as an album on its own, and taking their back catalogue into consideration, I'm going to give it just a plodding 3 out of 5 because I think there's a bit of repetition there from what's happened before. But again, that's not, you judge these things on their merits. And that's it. My name's been Darren Locke, and you've been playing with that bone whistle again, haven't you? Don't blow it, or the ghost will get you. And you better prog on.